and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. On Tuesday, the 14th of May, the Financial Times broke the news that WhatsApp, the messaging platform with 1.5 billion users worldwide, was hacked. Often regarded as being fully secure with end-to-end encryption, this hack revealed a major loophole in WhatsApp's system. While the messaging app has still not confirmed how many people were affected, the platform is urging all users to upgrade the app as a necessary safety measure to protect their data. On tonight's show, we take a closer look at the story and discuss the implication of this hack on an individual's security. To explore this story further, we are joined by Mr. Alexis Poulin, who is an analyst joining us from France. We are also joined by Dr. Simon Hale-Ross, who is a senior lecturer of law and policing at Edge Hill University, joining us from the UK. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Poulin, let's begin with you. Tell us the details of how this hack happened exactly and what it entailed.
Well, the hack is if you don't answer a call, a voice call on your WhatsApp, then a company can install a Trojan horse to download your detail and also to be able to plug in your phone, open the camera and the microphone from the distance. The problem is that a lot of whistleblowers or journalists have been tracked using this system. So the question is, as you said in the opening, can we trust this encrypted messaging system? Apparently not. Is there any other option? And what is the reason behind this hack? And we don't know yet what is the size and the extent of the damage done.
Yeah. And as the details emerge, we will know more about how many users were affected by this hack, but also how did WhatsApp identify that this took place? Do we have any details telling us about that situation?
Not so much. I mean, it was user coming back with this, and I think, WhatsApp and Facebook are very opaque about their security. During the last years, there's been so many issues about security and data leaks from users from Facebook that it's another one of the long trail. What it says is that these big companies clearly do not have the security that they pretend to have to protect their users. And this is a major issue that now a former founder of Facebook already said in the US that there should be antitrust law coming into force and trying to break Facebook because it is so big that it's becoming very dangerous. Because if you hack Facebook, then you hack the world, sort of to say. So either these companies really speed up their security measures and recruit the right expert, or they have to stop pretending that they are secure for the users, which clearly, given what happened in the last year, they are not.
Yeah. And right, Mr. Poulin, to talk more about the link of WhatsApp and Facebook and the fact that they come under one unit and the dangers of that. But before moving on to that point, I want to ask Dr. Simon, what are the legal aspects of this situation? Mr. Poulin talked about how these platforms pretend to be secure, pretend that their users have complete security, but they aren't in fact. This is misleading users and consumers. Aren't there any international laws to protect consumers from this?
I think we have to remember. I mean, look, it looks like it's only actually affected a few people. There's 1.5 billion users, so statistically, it's still a pretty safe format to use. But Mr. Poulin's absolutely right. It is not 100% secure, and let's have a look why. Well, we have to remember that with legitimate technological advances comes criminal exploitation. Historically, this has been the case, and international criminals, serious organized criminals, terrorists are using WhatsApp, they're using Facebook, they're using Twitter, and they're using these means to communicate with each other using commercial encryption applications such as WhatsApp. So the governments across the world have been going to Facebook, going to WhatsApp and asking them to give them encryption keys so that they can look into what's being said between targeted individuals who are accused or suspected of being international criminals or terrorists, and they've refused. So the states around the world have been left with no other option really but to actually try to find software companies such as the NGO to purchase software that will allow them to hack into the the devices themselves and to hack into the software, such as WhatsApp. So it's difficult and it's a fine line, and I suppose we all have to ask ourselves how far we are going to allow state agencies to impact on our privacy, and it's a conversation I suppose we all need to have. But there are laws out there that protect our privacy. Of course, we have the GDPR within the European Union that protects our privacy. And the Israeli
Dr. Simon, just on that point, of the GDPR, sorry to interrupt here, but can you just tell us if that law protects civilians from the state itself?
No, not entirely. The GDPR is mainly aimed at private companies. It's not really aimed at state agencies that can actually use this technology to get at your personal data. Yeah. So there is a difference. There is a difference.
So when these software suppliers supply software to countries with weak democratic records, that poses a grave danger, and that's something that the alleged hacker behind this WhatsApp hack is the NSO, the Israeli firm, is being accused of, that they are providing governments with weak human rights laws with the software to track and trace civilians.
That's absolutely right. Well, that's what it appears to be so. The NGO have obviously suggested that they've had absolutely nothing to do with this whatsoever. We'll have to just wait to see, I suppose, what further comes out from the conversation between the NGO and the Israeli government and the Ministry of Defence. It certainly looks that way. We don't really know fully what safety measures have been put in place by the NGO to ensure that they are accountable as well as the government agencies that are using this software.
Yeah. And on that point, I want a conversation back to Mr. Alexis Poulin. NSO, this Israeli firm, has countered the claims that they were behind this hack. But WhatsApp released a statement in which they said a private company that has been known to work with governments to deliver this spyware is seen to be the culprit. So are there any other organizations other than the NSO that could be responsible for this?
Well, yeah, of course. You could have a private company that is doing this. I don't know many, but NSO was on the top list. But if you look at the states, of course, every state now in the world is trying to have its cyber defense up and ready and is being operational in the attack more than in defense. The Russians are very up to speed, Chinese, of course, and Europe is lagging behind. So private company with the remit and the already having a client as such as government, there are not so many. You could find of Palantir, you could find of NSO, and a few others. But clearly, what is saying here is that the intelligence services, private services, pose a threat to the global consumer market, and not just to the intelligence or where you actually in your right as a state to monitor terrorist activities online for security of your people. There you just go further behind the red line and try to be a big brother. And a private one. So that is the main question, is how we safe online. It seems not, for a long time, but now it's getting more and more difficult to protect your data, to protect your anonymity, and to protect your privacy.
Right. And Mr. Poulin, hold on to that. We're also joined by Mr. Ammar Jaffri, the president of Pakistan Information Security Association, and he's joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much, Mr. Ammar, for joining us. So tell us, while we're talking about this global insecurity and the vulnerability that civilians are experiencing all across the globe because of hacks and data breaches, tell us about the state and the future of cyber warfare.
Let me tell you very briefly that now the new wars will be based on cyber. I think the actual foot on the ground of the army, I think that era is over now. Now people will try to disrupt the other countries' critical infrastructures, financial systems, and what not. So the worry is that there has been some very irresponsible states very recently in which the stuff were given to them by reputed companies to be used against terrorists and their criminals. But those countries are using it for the civil society. They are using it for against journalists, against human rights workers. So this is a point of worry. Yeah. So I think we all should now think like as a globe. Even in Singapore, when I'm here, I'm attending a conference, and this was my voice from Pakistan, that Pakistan, is behaving very responsibly, let me tell you very frankly. Our government is very, very conscious of these things, that criminals should not be allowed to use cyberspace and all these things. But at times, for example, if you see this event of WhatsApp recently, this company, NSO from Israel, I think they sold their some sort of material to be used against the criminals and the terrorists. But those countries used it against the people who speak against them. Yeah. So I think this is a matter of human rights now. It's no more a matter of one country talking to another country. A lot of stuff is in the market. It's offshore available. It's market stuff. Yeah. But I think the state should behave responsibly.
Yeah. And on that point, Dr. Hill, Mr. Ammar also pointed out towards the NSO's involvement in this. Now, Amnesty International, along with many other experts and human rights activists, have taken NSO to court, and they have sued them. They want there to be a ban on export licenses that Israel gives to them. Now, this isn't the first time that NSO has been embroiled in controversy. Why do you think Israel still continuously allows them export licenses?
I think since the late 1990s, Israel has done quite well actually in setting itself apart as the international hub for this kind of software. There are three main things in place that actually assist that process. But look, Israel isn't actually a part of the Five Eyes or even the 9 of the 14 Eyes, but they do have intelligence gathering and intelligence agreements, memorandums with the likes of the NSA and the likes of our own GCHQ in the UK. So if a request is put in for intelligence or information regarding a particular person, they will share that data quite freely with that particular state. Unfortunately, as the last speaker has just mentioned, the president there has just said, there is an issue with states then that are not, let's say, as accountable as others that can still attain this data due to such international agreements, and that's a concern moving forward in terms of data privacy.
Yeah, and Mr. Alexis, on that same there, Israel allowing to give NSO export licenses and many countries buying products from NSO. It's the think tank in Toronto estimated that almost 45 countries buy products from them. Do you think that should be the case when NSO does not seem to have had such a great track record when it comes to human rights?
Well, it's part of the weapon trade. I mean, now it's intelligence weapon. It's a tool for global surveillance. It's a tool for the competition that we have. So it's a big business. It's a global business. And no matter who is the buyer, as long as the check comes into the company profits. So I think it's all wishy-washy and it's all good for the NGO to say that it shouldn't be this way. But this is business as usual, I would say, in the weapon trade.
But do you think there's weight in Amnesty International's legal action taken against this company?
I mean, they can try, of course, but there are global rules, and I think they have battalions of lawyers to protect NSO and say that they stick to the rules and that they are not responsible for what the clients eventually do of their product, because their product is liable to international law, and they have the right to sell it to whoever they want, in a sense.
Yeah, and Dr. When we're talking about international law and their product being in the realm of international law, tell us about that. Aren't there any conventions out there that do state even governments from spying on civilians?
Well, yes. I mean, part of our own data protection legislation in the United Kingdom protects us to a certain degree. That's been built up over time by the European Union through the many protections there. But the main one at the moment is the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, which do protect us from certain aspects of this. But I mean, if the state can justify why they're actually targeting an individual via legislation that we have in the UK and European Union wide, then they can do that.
Yeah. Mr. Ammar, do you think that there is any protection at all for civilians? Is there any such thing as complete security from online surveillance?
Okay, let me put it in this way. There was a time when the world was fighting against weapons of mass destruction. I think now these things are becoming weapons of mass destruction. You know, these things are not sold to a private company in a country. These, you talked about 45 countries. You know, 6 or 7 countries have recently used it against their own people. So I think it's a matter of globe reacting responsibly against these cyber weapons, and they should be declared as weapons of mass destruction. Even if Israel is making these, Israeli companies making these things, they should, if there should be some international regulatory laws in which the stuff should be sold to even if it is sold to the intelligence service of a country, it must be used only against criminals or terrorists. So I think there's a point of worry if...
Mr. Ammar, so on that point, when you're talking about that there needs to be global action taken and there needs to be global collaboration to counter this, what policy measures do you think are urgently required?
I think the United States, United Nations should take cognizance of these things. I've told you, it's a weapons of mass destruction now. Because if people, you know, it's a matter of personal privacy. It's a matter of businesses of the people. So we are planning to fail now globally. Because if these things go into the hand of the criminals, I think they will definitely destroy all critical infrastructures. And, you know, developing countries will have less problems. The developed countries will have more problems. Because there has been a trend in which people use those countries which have poor cybercrime laws. So I think all criminals will move to those countries which have poor cybercrime laws or some bad infrastructure or poor infrastructure, and then the advanced countries will blame those countries that they are doing it. IP addresses will be tracked. So I think it is something which should be, all the human beings should sit together, work like a collective wisdom, and I'm sure they'll find something out. But if it is against state to state, against ideology of different people, I think it's a matter of human rights, I will say. And for human rights, everybody is very clear about it.
And I've noted down that point there, Mr. Ammar. Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us. Dr. Simon Hill, just going back to you and talking about the GDPR, and it's being hailed as a law that many other countries should also adopt and follow. Tell us how the landscape for social media has changed ever since this law was adopted and implemented.
Well, the biggest change is actually the amount that a company can be fined. That's perhaps one of the biggest changes that the GDPR has introduced. So at the moment, I think it's 4% annual global income. So Facebook at the moment have 10, I think it's around 10 current GDPR investigations against them already. And again, this is going back to Cambridge Analytica. It's some recent data breaches as well. I mean, there's an argument to suggest it's actually quite unfair because, Facebook, nothing's ever been done like this before. They are learning as they move forward, and companies are getting, especially like the NGO, they're getting better at hacking into these kind of formats. So the social media companies are always trying to react and think proactively about how they can protect their system.
Yeah.
But I think in all honesty, and this is my general belief, for the likes of you and I that use social media, that use the internet, use the WhatsApp, I think we have to all come to some sort of acceptance here that our privacy is not actually as private as we'd like. Unless you're a criminal and you're an expert at using certain types of software, VPNs and Tor, which wrap your IP address and hide it, unless you've got that kind of expertise, we're not going to be entirely private, I'm afraid. And that is just simply a result of terrorists and criminals using social media and WhatsApp.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point here, Dr. Simon, and something I want to highlight is the fact that you mentioned that it may not be entirely fair, the crackdown on Facebook, because they too are learning as an organization. Mr. Alex, do you feel that that there was any complacency on the part of Facebook after the past scandals took place and there were several data breaches, and that it is fair to prosecute the company as it is being done in the UK right now?
Well, I think the issue with Facebook is the business model. Clearly, they make money by selling personal data to customers, either being an answer or other things. And of course, in this sense, privacy is difficult because Facebook is the big brother of our time. And they can really targeting advertising is the key to their money-making plan. So it's not that they are learning, is that they have to change somehow their business model and not be able to make money out of private data. So far, it's far from this, and Mark Zuckerberg is trying hard to shift the company towards another source of revenues than only this, because Cambridge Analytica was just using the system as it was at the time. And there have been more and more questions about the threat to democracy that this platform, Facebook in particular, can be, given Cambridge Analytica scandal on the Brexit vote and on the Donald Trump campaign. And so far, Mark Zuckerberg has been meeting a lot of head of states and trying to say that Facebook has changed, but the business model hasn't changed.
Yeah. And when we're talking about security and revenue generation, let's talk a little about the link between Facebook and WhatsApp. Now, Facebook owns WhatsApp, but does it gather any revenue from this?
Same. It's all about the data analysis and of the users and how you could get. I think if Facebook bought WhatsApp and Instagram as well, is to prevent and to already be able to shift from one business to the other and make sure that the future will be bright. Because Facebook will come to an end as a platform, but there will be other services. And you can see now, I mean, we haven't mentioned, but Snapchat could also have some security breaches as bad as the one of Facebook. Same with Twitter. All these global companies, they are world companies, and they make money out of private data. So it's all about trying to get more and more information, pretending to protect them, but it's all the same business model about selling this information to announcers in the end of the day.
Yeah. Hold on to that thought, Mr. Poulin. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we're going to continue this discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special while we continue our discussion. So, Mr. Poulin, before going to break, we were talking about the link between WhatsApp and Facebook and the fact that Facebook is using WhatsApp almost like a security blanket and to take out more information from it. Now, we hear a lot of users reporting that once they send a message on WhatsApp, they often coincidentally see something like that being advertised on Facebook or that person appearing in their mentions. Is it just a coincidence?
No, I mean, if you sign, the problem is that we use these services without reading all the legal notice, which are very long in pages and words. But we sign by using this system, the spying by this platform of our activities online. Of the word we say, of what the people we meet, of what we do. And this is all that we agreed on when we signed the global disclaimer of this platform. We don't have a team of lawyers to just help us amend, or it's either we don't use platform or we use them with the fact that it is not a secure environment for our privacy. So far, people were not so much aware of this, but with all the scandals in the past month, I think users and consumers have changed and are being more cautious about these platforms and are looking for more secure other platforms like Telegram compared to WhatsApp or Signal or others for instant messaging. And as Facebook, there is some studies saying that in the near future, there will be more dead profile than active profile on the platform, because the younger generation are not joining Facebook. They are on other platform, or they just will find another way to exchange information. So this is what has changed. It's the consumer approach to their data privacy.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Poulin, for joining us and highlighting that point here. Let's take the discussion forward. We're also joined by Mr. Rakshita Kasoon, who's a software developer, joining us from Colombo. We're also joined by Mr. Syed Naveed Haider, who is an IT consultant, joining us from Karachi. Mr. Naveed, let's begin with you. Tell us a little about what encryption actually means. How can the layman understand it?
When we talk about the communicating data, and to talk something on a particular media, we define encryption that as the talk and the word that basically is scrambled by the computer in that way that can be taken and understand easily by the parties in which the communication is going on. No one can interfere in it, and no one can decrypt it, basically. Encryption is what is basically trying to protect the calls, the chats, and the data between between two parties, or more than two persons or individuals who are basically communicating on any media, on any social aspect, on any social tool and activity, and like this.
Mr. Naveed, tell us, when we're talking about WhatsApp and its end-to-end encryption, does that mean that no one can interfere and look into the messages that are shared between two people on WhatsApp?
Yeah, of course, that's a very important aspect, basically. And in this today's world, basically, everything is important. It's not just limited to a single group, to a single corporate, or to a single entity, but it's to an entire individual as well. Basically, as we are progressing in this era, basically, our data is more crucial and more vulnerable than any time in the previous past. Like, we have our bank accounts, we have our social media contact, we have our social contact number, all types of insurance and other contact number we have are of very sensitive nature. And it's now very critical basically. And most of the hackers are ready, and they are constantly searching and trying to invade in your system and basically trying to steal the information so that they can use it in financial or any other mischieving ways. So that is very important in this. So end-to-end encryption is basically maintaining a secrecy.
Right. Mr. Naveed, sorry to interrupt you here, but you highlighted something important, that our information is much more vulnerable than it has ever been before. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, of course, because the hackers are much more equipped now, and as they are much more greedy and are using information for any types of their misdeed, basically. So this is important. They can misuse your communication. They can steal your data, the family information, your personal information, your social context, and they can mislead your information, your contacts, your messages to anyone, to anyone in the world, and that can definitely discard your picture in your family, in anywhere, and this really tarnish your image. And that is what we crucially need to maintain. In this
and
time.
Mr. Naveed, hold on to that thought. Dr. Simon, when we're talking about a vulnerability, which groups do you think are most vulnerable to being targets of this spyware, this malware hacking?
I suppose it depends on who is using it. If the state agencies are using it, GCHQ, the US NSA, if they're using it, then I would imagine that the criminal activity is going to be targeted at some point, and it's the criminal usage that's going to be targeted. But as we've just, the previous discussion that we've just had, the issue is, of course, that when some state agencies do get hold of the data, it's from countries that are perhaps less accountable than the United Kingdom, yourself, and the United States and the European Union as a whole. Then we have some issues there, don't we? I think we're all quite vulnerable to these kinds of attacks, and that's perhaps one of the most concerning points raised by Syed just a moment ago. The Pegasus malware that was developed by NGO, once that gets into your phone, the controller of that can then use the phone exactly the same way that you do. They can actually download images into your phone and use those in your phone. They can actually place into your phone GPS data. They can place into your phone contacts. They can put you in places at certain times without you knowing. The most worrying thing is the fact that they can actually download images into your phone. So if a state agency was, let's say, after a particular individual, a human rights activist, let's say they could actually place indecent images of children into that person's phone, tip off the police, and we have a massive issue. And then you've got to, as it's your phone, you've got to explain why those images are there. So it is really concerning, the amount of power wielded by this Pegasus malware, which is used by our own government. It's used by our agencies.
Yeah.
But it's not just that. But that software doesn't just come through WhatsApp. It can actually hack into the iOS software in the Apple phone. I have it on good authority that any Apple phone below the Apple 8 can quite easily be hacked by this software, and it often is by our own policing agencies in the United Kingdom.
And Dr. Simon, you've highlighted how absolutely evasive this technology, this software is. Now, my question to you is, do you think that a company that produces the software, there should be limitations on who they sell it to? If there are countries in which there is the lack of accountability and there are chances of it being misused, that product shouldn't be sold to them.
Mr. Poulin had this right. Big data, if you like, if you want to call it that, is almost the new arms race. We're almost seeing, if you like, a Cold War of technology at the moment, a technological Cold War. China is now developing a system in order to bring the world 5G. That will revolutionise how we're communicating now. It will revolutionise the world. It's going to be absolutely massive. The amount of data that country will hold on people will be huge. You're right. There should be more accountability, especially for malware that's developed, such as the strength of this. There should be accountability in place, but unfortunately, there's not. Money talks, I'm afraid. NGO as a company in 2013 they were turning over 40 million. Now they're turning over 250 million. So you've got to ask yourself, well, what a lovely growth that is, and it's, you know, I wish them well. It's a nice growth, but where are they selling to? What's the record keeping like? Who would they be accountable to? Would they be accountable to Israel because they're based there? What about companies that are based in Panama, where NGO was actually based last year? So what happens then? Who is that state then accountable to? What's in place?
Do you think that they should be accountable to the Israeli government?
Yes, I do. I think they should be accountable to whoever, the hosting state. Wherever the servers are hosting, they should be accountable to that state.
Yeah. Mr. Naveed, going back to Dr. Simon's point that big data is the future and wars will be conducted using it. Tell us what the future looks like. How will more and more countries try to get into this arms race of collecting more and more big data?
Yeah, obviously, big data is becoming more and more important part as the individuals and the corporates are concerned. And most of the work and most of the activities are being conducted on it. Most of the companies will use it to, for example, to increase their sales and to motivate the product, motivate their employees, and to help increasing and enhancing their productivity. So big data can come along whenever you go into a big data. So the risk of vulnerability and other things come along with it, basically. So the importance of this is basically you have to focus onto it and how to utilize it, because it's going to be a part of your routine life. And not only the companies, but basically individuals are also getting more and more important information through this data compilation. Most of the tools are coming over here, which give you an exact and right information about our banking information, about our personal, for example, life insurance and other our medical facilities, health-wise, and lot more that are basically related to our normal life.
Yeah. So all our information is gathered, our footsteps are gathered, and they can then be used against us. What does the future look like? What do you think? Do you think international governing bodies will take notice of this and implement policies to curb the collection of big data?
Yeah, obviously, governance is basically the most important part. If we talk about the data security or IT security, so governance is basically implemented and being adopted by most of the banks, and recently the State Bank of Pakistan has also ordered to implement the governance policy and to train their employees and their staff who can have the governance and can rule out and can maintain and implement the policies on the banking sectors, on all basically on different aspects of life as well. And if we are moving and going into the next era, basically, a new technology is basically coming into it. Might be you and my most respected colleagues are well aware of it. That is called IoT, Internet of Things, basically. What is going to be coming into it, that all your routine life working and your activities are being monitored in this digitally aspect. Basically, you are entering into a digital era.
Right.
Your home, your compliance and all your other activities are being digitally connected, and that is basically what the data is include.
Right. And Mr. Naveed, you've highlighted how everything is now going digital. Dr. Simon, my last question to you, do you think with so much digitalization, the laws are keeping up with this transformation and are doing enough to protect the citizens? Do you think there are enough firewalls being implemented and there is enough technology protecting people from the harmful uses of technology?
I think there's a yes and a no answer to that, I'm afraid. Our human rights legislation in the European Union is very strong. We have a separate article under EU law, Article 7, which protects our data privacy specifically. And obviously we then have Article 8 and then Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights. So we are quite well protected. But emerging and new technologies we're always going to be lagging behind, and historically the UK as a state and the European Union as an international organisation has always found itself lagging behind in terms of lawmaking to ensure that this new type of technology is somehow legalised and used. I think what we're going to see on the horizon is more and more accountability of governance of these particularly social media. In the United Kingdom, we're already putting together. Right now, we're building in an independent organisation to oversee social media here. But it's what remit that has. How far will that go? I mean, servers, as you know, we're dealing with international organisations, dealing with international law. It's not just the servers are here. The UK has this. the servers with you. You have those servers, and that's what you get. And China has these servers, and that's what they get. It's not limited that. It knows no borders, and that's the problem. Who do you put at the top of it? Who do you put at the top?
And that's an issue that I'm sure governments are having to face. How do you regulate something as widespread as the internet, and how do you regulate these social media platforms? Thank you so much, Dr. Simon Hale, for joining us and talking to us. Thank you, Syed, Naveed, Haider, for taking out time and talking to us. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again next week with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.